Indeed, this is impressive, one of the best in New York. At 48, I found myself at a university hospital in New York. Jake, a passing doctor, called out my name, his eyes widening in surprise. Hey, Ethan. Ethan and I were classmates, and we worked hard together to get into medical school. I had to discontinue studying medicine once for certain reasons. Ethan, you really made your dream come true. Seeing Ethan in his white coat made me smile a bit, but his face remained stiff. An awkward air flowed between us. Then, Ethan suddenly laughed. Why are you here, crying baby who left medical school? Or did you come for a checkup because you are an idiot? I couldn't believe the words Ethan was uttering. What's with that tone? Obviously, Ethan was completely looking down on me for giving up my dream of becoming a doctor. Just then, a woman came running over. Excuse me, Dr. Jake. I am Ms. Johnson, the faculty secretary at this hospital. Ethan spoke to the breathless secretary with a smile. Doctor? Huh, this guy wasn't even studying medicine. Then the secretary looked at Ethan seriously. He is a respectable doctor, right? Starting today, I'm taking on the role of department head. What? Ethan's eyes widened as he looked back and forth between the secretary and me. The boardroom is this way. Ignoring Ethan, the secretary led me to the boardroom. My name is Jake. I grew up in a single-parent household with my mom and younger sister, Sophie. We lived in a small apartment. When I was in elementary school, a gorgeous mansion was built diagonally across from our place. It looked like a luxury inn. Its size had been the talk of the neighborhood since it was being built. My sister, Sophie, used to say, I wish I could live in such a big house, even just once. I wonder who lives there. Sophie would always stop there on her way home from school, daydreaming about living in that house. Excuse me, can I help you? A voice came from behind. I turned around to see a somewhat familiar face. Oh, you're in Section 2, aren't you? A transferee. The boy standing there had a serious expression, and he nodded. I'm Jake, from Section 3. This is my sister Sophie, a first grader. Sophie greeted him, and he did the same. What's your name? Ethan. Nice to meet you, Ethan. As I extended my hand, Ethan just stared at it. Come on, shake hands. I grabbed Ethan's hand and shook it firmly. You're a tough one, Ethan murmured. Then he shook off my hand and walked through the large gate into his house. He comes across as quite standoffish. That was my impression. After spending a month as a transferee, Ethan still seemed to have not made any friends. He always went home alone after school. That's why he can't make friends, being so aloof, I thought. I went to pick up Sophie from her classroom and hurried after Ethan. What, Jake? Let's go home together. Ethan didn't reply and just turned back around, walking briskly. Ethan, wait. Oh, sorry. Ethan stood still, waiting for Sophie to catch up. He's unfriendly and blunt to me, but kind to Sophie. Not a bad guy after all, I thought. I had this instinctive feeling. One day, as I was heading to soccer club practice, I noticed Ethan was also about to leave. Ethan, do you like soccer? Ethan stared at the soccer ball I was holding. I don't like soccer. Huh? So there are people who don't like soccer. Soccer is the most fun thing for me. Just as I was about to passionately talk about the joys of soccer, Ethan spoke first. I'm off to tutoring now. Tutoring? Do you really need that in elementary school? None of my friends go to tutoring. I'm going to be a great doctor like my dad. I don't have time to play like you, Jake. Saying this, Ethan quickly rode off on his bike. Right, I heard that Ethan's dad is a doctor, and he owns a clinic in the next town. All doctors like studying. Just like I love soccer. Ethan loves studying. He's an incredible guy. I honestly respect Ethan. The next morning, I saw Ethan on the way to school and spoke to him. Let's play soccer sometime. When are you free? Ethan glanced at me but quickly looked forward again. I told you yesterday, I don't have free time. I have 3 tutors at home. I'm studying hard to become a doctor. If I have time to kick a ball, I'd rather be holding a pencil. I wanted to share the fun of soccer with him. I wondered if he really enjoyed studying, but Ethan's determination overwhelmed me, and I couldn't say anything more. Sophie then joined in. Ethan, you're gonna be a doctor. That's awesome. Can you cure my illness? Illness? Ethan looked a bit troubled as Sophie pleaded with sparkling eyes. Sophie had been frail since she was young, often in and out of the hospital. Now her condition is more stable, and she visits the doctor once a month. However, if she catches a cold, it worsens quickly, so she's always careful. So that's why you always wear a mask. Sorry, I didn't know. Ethan gently strokes Sophie's head, understanding her need for a mask in crowds. I got it. I'll cure Sophie's illness. Just wait until I become a doctor. Hearing Ethan's words, Sophie jumped up and down in joy. Watching them, I felt a pang of discomfort inside. Then, I'll become a doctor too, I blurted out before I realized it. They both stared at me, wide-eyed. I'll cure Sophie's illness. I won't lose to Ethan. At that moment, I didn't understand what was going through my mind. But seeing Sophie's happy face turn towards Ethan, maybe I was a bit jealous that it wasn't me, her brother, protecting her. But you hate studying, big brother. It's okay. Ethan will cure me. No way. I'll be the one to cure Sophie. Watching our rare sibling argument, Ethan laughed. From then on, I started studying hard, surprising everyone around me. Of course, I continued playing soccer, but I woke up an hour earlier to study. That was my method of studying. Like Ethan's family, we didn't have money for tutoring or private teachers. But I believed that if I studied hard on my own, I could become a doctor too. Believing in this, I worked hard at my studies. This is an extra worksheet. Solve it if you're interested. Ethan offered help in his blunt way. Ethan might seem standoffish at first glance, but he's actually kind-hearted. He always wore clothes that seemed expensive, never bursting into laughter at jokes like the rest of us, always keeping his composure. Ethan was an unapproachable figure, always alone, but he never boasted about his family's wealth. Moreover, he never looked down on our single-parent household or our lack of tutoring funds. He never laughed at me for aspiring to be a doctor, even though I was occupied playing soccer. If you don't understand something, just ask. You won't solve it by thinking alone, he casually said, supporting my studies. I came to like this side of Ethan. Though we both aimed to become doctors, we started walking different paths when we entered middle school. Ethan was accepted to a prestigious, exclusive school known for its high academic level and high tuition. On the other hand, I went to the public middle school because my family couldn't afford to send me to the private school. Even though we attended different schools, we were neighbors, so we saw each other every morning. Good morning. Perfect timing. About this problem. You use this formula for that. Why don't you ask me at night instead? I'll be late for school. Sorry. Our relationship felt more like I was relying on Ethan than being comrades. Despite this, Ethan never complained and always helped me. I'll treat you to a meal next time. Ethan shook his head. No thanks. I haven't done anything worth being treated for. More importantly, make sure you really become a doctor and cure Sophie's illness. Yeah. Ethan patted my shoulder and smiled. I'll become a doctor with Ethan and cure Sophie's illness. Thanks to this strong determination, I maintained the top rank in middle school. I excelled in a soccer club, achieving both academic and athletic success. Eventually, I was granted a scholarship to one of the best high schools. Great. Ethan praised me, which made me incredibly happy. However, despite receiving a scholarship, there were various expenses we had to cover. So, I decided to quit the soccer club and start working part-time at a restaurant. Are you sure you can handle your studies? Ethan worried. I'm fine. I just shifted the time I spent on soccer to work. Additionally, I could avail of free duty meals there. Knowing my family situation, Ethan didn't say anything more. He silently respected my decisions. Though unspoken, I trusted Ethan the most. High school was challenging. I had to grapple with higher academic levels and frustrations that I never experienced in middle school. However, I was grateful to attend this high school. Thanks to their program, I acquired academic skills, and I now have a good chance of being accepted to medical school without tutoring. And then, in a blink, my 3 years of high school passed, and it was time for university entrance exams. I applied to a local university, and Ethan applied to a university in New York. Miraculously, we both passed. For once, Ethan showed his emotions openly, and we hugged each other in celebration. Jake, you made it. That's truly amazing. Your self-discipline has borne fruit. Ethan celebrated my success as if it were his own. Ethan, Thank you for everything. I was grateful for all the times he taught me, solved the difficult problems in my entrance exam guides before I did, and silently supported me from nearby. Having Ethan, with a strong determination to become a doctor, by my side, I was able to chase his back and get here. But now, we'll be apart in college. Suddenly, I felt a wave of sadness. You've just reached the starting line. Why such a face? It's just, I'm worried about going it alone without Ethan. The person I used to try to catch up with is leaving. The thought of being without him made my anxiety grow. Ethan then slapped my back. We're both going to be doctors, right? Come on, shake hands. He extended his hand. Hesitantly, I reached out mine, and Ethan firmly grasped it. I was the one who initiated the handshake when we first met 9 years ago. Remembering Ethan's standoffish demeanor back then, I couldn't help but smile. What's that for? Ethan frowned. Nothing. Next time we shake hands will be when we're doctors. With that, I squeezed his hand tightly. I started my college life in my hometown, while Ethan went off to NY. I made friends quickly, joined a futsal club. I did part-time job as tutor, and studied at the diner with friends before exams. Though studying was tough, I was living fulfilling days. Ethan and I only met during long holidays when he came back home. We rarely contacted each other, but it seemed like Ethan was also enjoying his life in NY. Time flew by, and I proceeded to medical school, where I was in my 3rd year. One day, my phone rang during class. It was unusual for me to receive a call. I initially ignored the call, waiting for the phone to stop vibrating in my pocket. However, it kept vibrating. I reluctantly checked it. It was my mom. She is aware that I'm in class at this hour, yet she is calling. I doubt it's an emergency. The image of Sophie's smiling face flashed in my mind. I hurriedly left the classroom. Sophie hadn't been well recently. She had been in and out of the hospital frequently for about a year. I quickly made a return call to my mom. Jake, I'm sorry. Can you come home right away? Sophie. What happened to Sophie? My heart was pounding, but even more noticeable was the tremble in my mother's voice. I'm going to be a doctor. I steeled myself, calmed my mom down, and listened to her story. According to her, Sophie had suddenly passed out. She was rushed to the hospital by a paramedic. However, she is in the ICU and in critical condition. I'll be there right away. It's going to be okay, Mom. Sophie is a strong girl. I said that to reassure myself as well. Then, I hurried to the hospital. Sophie. Lying in the hospital bed, Sophie was connected to many tubes, and her condition looked worse than I had imagined. Sophie, I'm going to cure your illness, so just wait for me, okay? Sophie. Hey, Sophie. The alarm on the heart monitor started blaring, and doctors and nurses rushed into the room. Mom and I, pushed to a corner of the room, could only stand there helplessly. Despite the doctor's frantic efforts, Sophie passed away. She was gone so suddenly. Despite being a medical student, all I could do was helplessly stand in a corner of the room. I was devastated. There was nothing I could do. Throughout the funeral, Ethan stood silently by my side. You should eat something. After Sophie was laid to rest, and I was in a daze, Ethan offered me sandwiches. I just stared at his hand and said, Ethan, I'm giving up on becoming a doctor. While facing down, with Sophie gone, becoming a doctor seemed meaningless. Ethan leaned in to look at my face, his eyes wide, shaking his head. What are you talking about? We promised both of us become doctors. I'm sorry. You worked so hard to get into medical school. I'm sorry. We said we'd shake hands again when we became doctors. I'm sorry. Ethan, who had supported me and held back his tears while I wept at Sophie's funeral, now let his tears flow freely. I turned my face away from him. After a while, Ethan stood up. See you around. He turned his back and walked away slowly. Engulfed in grief, I didn't have the strength to chase after Ethan's departing figure. I was left alone, crying endlessly. Losing my purpose to become a doctor, I completely stopped attending a medical school. What are you going to do now, Jake? My mother, who had always supported my aspirations, was now worriedly asking me this question repeatedly. I'll give up on pursuing medicine and start working. I've already spoken to the manager of the restaurant where I used to work in high school. I won't be a burden to you, Mom. Is that so? My mother didn't say anything more. And true to my words, I withdrew from the medical school. Time passed, and now I'm 48 years old. Today, I'm here at a university hospital in New York. Indeed, this is impressive, one of the best in New York. I was overwhelmed by its size and found myself completely lost in the vast interior. As I walked around like a stranger in town, my eyes locked with a doctor coming from the opposite direction. Jake. The doctor stopped in his tracks, his eyes widening. "Hey, Ethan." The name tag on the doctor's white coat unmistakably read Ethan, and additionally it stated internal medicine. Ethan really made his dream come true, and he became an internist, probably to take over his family's practice. Seeing Ethan in his white coat made me happy a bit, but his face remained tense. An awkward air flowed between us. Then, Ethan suddenly laughed. "Why are you here, crying baby who left medical school? Or did you come for a checkup because you're an idiot?" I couldn't believe the words coming from Ethan. What kind of tone was that? I couldn't help but feel irritated. It seemed like Ethan was completely looking down on me for giving up my dream of becoming a doctor. Just then, a woman came running towards us. "Excuse me, Dr. Jake. I am Ms. Johnson, the faculty secretary at this hospital," the breathless secretary said. Ethan, smiling, talked to her. "Doctor, this guy even wasn't studying medicine." The secretary looked at Ethan seriously. "He is a respectable doctor, right? Starting today, I'm taking on the role of department head." "What?" Ethan's eyes widened as he looked back and forth between the secretary and me. "The boardroom is this way." Ignoring Ethan, the secretary led me to the boardroom. After greeting the board, I began organizing the director's office. "Starting today, this is my workplace. Can I really manage in such a large hospital? And more importantly, can I, of all people, take on the role of department head, overseeing other doctors?" And with Ethan here, too. As these anxieties assaulted me, my pager went off. "Hello, Jake speaking." "Yes, I'll be right there." It was a call for backup from the ear. I quickly changed and ran towards the ear. "Wait, is it this way?" As I struggled to figure out the direction, someone forcefully pushed me from behind. "Snap out of it. The ear is this way. Hurry up." It was Ethan. He must have received the same call for assistance. I followed Ethan. "Jake, what's your specialty?" he asked. "Surgery," I replied. "Then he's your patient." Ethan pointed to a patient with a multiple fracture. "Got it." With the help of the medical staff, I fervently exert my skills to treat the patient before me. After finishing the surgery and leaving the operating room, Ethan was there waiting. "Good job," he said gruffly, handing me a cup of coffee. "Thanks." I accepted it, unsure of what to say next. Then, Ethan apologized to me in very sincere manner. "Jake, I'm sorry for what I said earlier. I wish I had been more thoughtful." Ethan repeatedly apologizing over and over. Memories of our time together from the moment we first met flooded my mind, and I couldn't help but chuckle. "What's so funny?" Ethan lifted his head, his lips pursed in annoyance. "No, it's just that you never speak ill of others, Ethan. I figured you were trying hard to be sarcastic earlier." Ethan's face quickly turned red. He never laughed at me, the soccer fanatic, when I said I wanted to become a doctor. When I struggled with the math question for over 5 minutes, he always encouraged me, saying, "You just haven't grasped the technique yet." Moreover, when I was about to give up, thinking I couldn't get into the best high school without attending tutoring, he convinced me with his somewhat forceful logic, saying, "Not necessarily paying for a tutor. I can teach you." Ethan, in his entire life, never speaks ill of others. I couldn't forgive you for giving up on becoming a doctor so easily, so I had to say at least one sarcastic thing. Hearing Ethan's honest feelings made me reflect on my decision to quit medical school that day. "Is that all for today? I have a lot I want to ask Jake. How about we go for a drink?" he suggested. "Oh, that sounds great. Let's go." We got ready to leave and headed to Ethan's favorite spot. "I'm relieved." "About what?" "I was worried you were going to take me to some fancy French restaurant or something." Ethan laughed at my comment. We had always come from completely different backgrounds. Ethan was the son of a doctor, a wealthy family, while I was raised by a single mother and had to work part-time from high school due to our financial struggles. But now, Ethan and I are sitting here in a tavern, sharing beers and old stories. It feels incredibly gratifying, almost unbelievable. So, you didn't actually quit pursuing medicine after all? He then asked. I shook my head quietly. Then how come you are here now? He was curious. I downed my beer in one go and began to tell him about everything that happened after Sophie's death. After losing Sophie, I felt I had lost my purpose in becoming a doctor. I spent about a month shut in my house, reflecting on everything. I fought a lot, sometimes even attempting to return to school, but memories of Sophie always held me back from going to class. I couldn't go beyond the gate. I realized that I couldn't become a doctor, not because I didn't want to. The day I went to the school to submit my withdrawal form, I happened to meet Professor Simpson from the Department of Surgery. Life isn't always a straight path, Jake. You have plenty of time. If you ever want to come back, you're always welcome. Professor Simpson had treated Sophie when she was little. Now, he is teaching at the medical school where I used to study. He was very happy when he learned that I was pursuing medicine, and he always looked out for me. I appreciated Professor Simpson's heartfelt words, but at the time, I was convinced I would never return to the field of medicine. Then, I started working at the restaurant where I had been a part-timer in high school. Working helped me forget about Sophie, so I seldom took a day off. Is working at the restaurant fun? Yeah, it is. That's good then. My mother quietly supported me through this period. 2 years later, a life-changing incident occurred. While I was working, a customer suddenly collapsed from their chair. Are you okay? Manager, call an ambulance. Please bring the AED. I reacted before I could think. Amidst the chaos, I performed CPR and used the AED in a frantic rush. When the ambulance arrived, I provided detailed information about the customer's condition to the paramedics. They were surprised by my accurate handling and communication. Are you in the medical field? They asked. No, I just work here. Thank you so much. We'll take it from here. The paramedic appreciated our assistance and quickly departed. Jake, thank you. If you weren't here, I couldn't have helped our important customer. The manager, along with everyone in the restaurant, gave me a warm round of applause. I was filled with indescribable self-esteem. After closing the store, the manager treated me to a beer as thanks. Thank you for today. Maybe you really should have become a doctor. The manager looked at me intently. Me? No way, I'm just a coward. Professor Simpson told me I could return to the medical school if I wanted, but 2 years have passed since then. There were plenty of students, and I assumed the professor must have forgotten about me. As I contemplated this, the manager patted my shoulder. Professor Simpson was worried about you. Professor Simpson from the Department of Surgery. The manager smiled. To my surprise, Professor Simpson is a regular at this restaurant. According to the manager, Professor Simpson still visits the restaurant despite his hectic schedule. However, he hasn't been visiting as frequently as he used to since his appointment as a professor 2 years ago. I had never noticed, which was not surprising to me, as most of the time I was in the kitchen and seldom saw the customers' faces. Professor Simpson often secretly watched you work from a distance. I wondered what he thought as he watched me cook. The manager continued as if reading my thoughts. He said, if you're doing what you want to do, that's all that matters. He believed your sister would have respected your decision even if you didn't become a doctor. Remembering Sophie, who always followed me around, filled me with warmth. The manager then cleared his throat. Working here is not what you want to do, is it? His face was serious. I enjoy working here, feeling fulfilled every day. I'm not lying. The manager, who generally didn't hire high school students. However, he had made an exception for me when I applied out of desperation and explaining my family situation. Here, I had learned how to behave as a working adult, and the manager was the only person I could confide in when I left medical school. You can work here until you sort out your feelings without worrying about your mom. Of course, I'd be thrilled if you worked here forever, he had said calmly at that time. Working hard for the manager, that was the source of my passion for my job. The manager looked at me intently and shook his head. You must have felt something today, right? Be honest with yourself. Back then, I decided to fully support you. I witnessed your dedicated work at part-time jobs to contend with the family's financial odds and pursue your dream of becoming a doctor. There was a sparkle in the manager's eyes. I wasn't expected, but he was concerned about me and watched over me. I closed my eyes, recalling the sense of fulfillment I felt today while desperately trying to save a customer. Somewhere along the way, it wasn't just about saving Sophie. Of course, I wanted to save her, but I also wanted to save many more patients. I finally realized that. Manager, I will pursue my dream again to become a doctor. The manager nodded vigorously in response to my words. So, did you get back into medical school? Yeah. I switched to a part-time job to allocate time for study. Studying alone was incredibly tough, and I realized just how much Ethan had helped me back in my prime. Honestly, I often thought of contacting Ethan, but every time I recalled the memory of Ethan walking away from me after the funeral, I disciplined myself not to seek help from him. I will meet with Ethan only after I become a doctor. I've set these words as my goal. And a year later, I became a medical student again. Thanks to Professor Simpson, I was able to transfer into my third year of medical school. With a renewed perspective on life, I was determined to become a doctor, aiming to save more lives than anyone else. I will meet Ethan with pride. With that mantra, I immersed myself in my study. After a couple of years of practicing surgery, I had the opportunity to further my study in Geneva, thanks to Professor Simpson's advice. Geneva. Ethan was surprised. Yeah. I made a good connection with a professor there, and I secured a position in the Department of Surgery. That's how I honed my skills as a surgeon in Geneva. I returned about 6 months ago. Professor Simpson and a board member of this hospital knew each other, and the professor recommended me for department head. Explaining all this, I realized that much had happened. Ethan listened to my story, and then downed his beer. He extended his right hand. Huh? Come on. Ethan took my right hand and gripped it firmly. We promised, didn't we, to shake hands again when we both became doctors. I felt a warmth in my eyes. Jake, you've done well. To think that we'll be seeing each other every day again. Perhaps due to the effect of his alcoholic drink, Ethan, always level-headed, shed tears. It's unusual for him. Sorry about that time, Ethan. Will you still be my friend? Of course. You are, however, my subordinate. Don't say that. I was uncomfortable with the new setting of Ethan being my subordinate. Seeing my reaction, Ethan chuckled. You'll be fine, Jake. But remember, you can always count on me. I'm always on your side. We shook hands firmly again. From that day on, both of us have been striving as doctors. Mr. Chairman, regarding this issue, stop calling me that. Ethan would tease me. Ethan, about this? Meanwhile, I continued to heavily rely on Ethan, and nothing changed. Ethan, thanks for everything. I'll treat you to a meal next time. How about sushi? His unexpected answer caught me off guard. Seeing my reaction, Ethan laughed heartily. Just kidding. I haven't done anything worth being treated for. So, keep up your good work. Thanks, Ethan. Having Ethan nearby makes me feel like I can do even more as a doctor. I want to save as many people as possible.